You ever notice how money doesn't leave all at once? It just splits up into pieces you don't question. You get paid, and for a second it feels intact. Then something small goes, not even enough to matter. Then something else automatic. You don't even see it happen, and by the time you actually stop and look at what's left, it already feels decided. And if you sit with that for a second, it starts getting uncomfortable because it's not just one thing taking your money, it's layers. It disappears into things that feel normal enough to not question. The way certain expenses always show up first, like they were already scheduled to win. The way saving only happens when nothing else does, which almost never lines up. The way debt doesn't shout, it stays there, slowly reshaping what your future money will look like. And then there are parts you don't even interact with directly. Money being reduced before it reaches you. Money being set aside for things that might never happen. Money that's supposed to exist for a version of you that feels too far away to care about right now. None of it feels connected at first, but the longer you look at it, the more it starts to feel like one system, something you've been inside of this whole time. This is personal finance, but not the version people usually talk about. This is what your money has been doing the entire time, whether you were paying attention or not. Why budgeting matters, and the 50-30-20 rule. This is where it starts getting clearer. Not just the idea of budgeting, but what budgeting is actually doing underneath everything you've been noticing. Because up until now, it feels like money just moved. But budgeting is the moment you start seeing where it was always trying to go. You don't really think about budgeting at first. You just notice patterns. Certain things always get paid first. Certain things always take more than expected. And somehow, what's left never lines up with what you thought you had. And that's when it hits. Your money already has structure. You just didn't build it. Budgeting is just taking control of that structure, not restricting your money, just deciding where it goes before everything else does. And that's where this rule shows up, not as something complicated, just a way to finally see the split that's already happening. The 50-30-20 rule. It's just a way to divide what comes in into three directions. 50% goes into things you don't really get to negotiate with. 30% goes into things that feel like choices. The other 20%, that's the part that's supposed to move you forward. That's it. That 50%, that's where most of your money disappears without direction. Rent, bills, food, transportation, things that don't wait for permission. They're not optional. And when that part grows too big, everything else starts shrinking without you realizing. Because once those are covered, you're already halfway done, and you didn't decide any of it. That's why it feels like money leaves so fast, because half of it was never really yours to control. Then there's the 30%. This is where it gets confusing, because this part feels like freedom, but it's also where things quietly get out of control. Eating out, subscriptions, random upgrades that feel small in the moment. This is where money stretches further than you notice. And the problem isn't spending here, it's not realizing how much space this part takes up. Then the 20%. This is the part that almost never happens naturally. Saving, paying off debt, setting something aside for later. This part doesn't pull from your money. It waits for you to give it something, and that's why it's usually empty, because everything else already moved first. But the rule flips that. It forces that 20% to exist before the rest expands and consumes it. That's why people say it works, not because it's perfect, but because it creates balance where there wasn't any. However, people tend to misunderstand this rule. They treat it like a rule you have to hit exactly. Like if it is not 50, 30, 20, you failed. But that's not what it is. It's just a lens, a way to catch imbalance early. Because in real life, that 50% might creep higher, the 30% might quietly expand, and the 20% might disappear completely. And if you're not looking, you won't notice until everything feels compressed. And that brings us to savings. Saving sounds simple until you realize it depends on everything else not taking your money first. And from what you've already seen, everything else doesn't wait. So saving ends up feeling optional, like something you'll get to when things calm down, when expenses drop, when income goes up, when life feels less stressful. But that moment doesn't really show up because the way you live your life isn't built to leave leftovers, it's built to absorb them. That's why the idea of I'll save what's left keeps failing. Not because you lack discipline, but because there's almost never a clean remainder to work with. Money doesn't pause and ask you what you want to do with it. It keeps moving. So saving only starts making sense when it stops being the last step and starts happening at the same time everything else does. But what actually matters is that it happens every time, because consistency builds something you can feel, not immediately, but over time. And that brings us to debt. Even after the money is gone, debt doesn't feel like something you carry all the time. It feels quiet, manageable, just a number sitting somewhere in the background. You don't wake up thinking about it every day. You just see the minimum, pay it, and move on, like it's handled. But that's where it shifts, because the minimum doesn't remove it, it just keeps it in place. And while everything else around you resets every month, income comes in, expenses go out, debt stays, waiting. And that's why it feels like you're moving but not really getting ahead, because a portion of your future money is always being pulled backwards. Saving doesn't happen on its own. Debt doesn't disappear on its own either. It stays exactly where you leave it, growing slowly if ignored, shrinking only when you push against it. And that brings us to taxes, the part you don't even see leave. But it's already gone before anything else begins, because taxes don't feel like spending. You don't choose them, you don't schedule them, they just happen. You look at your income, but what you actually receive is already reduced. The number you think you earn isn't the number you get to use. That's why things feel harder than they should, because you're planning with one number in your head while living off another. And the strange part is, you adjust to it without noticing. You treat what lands in your account as the full payment, even though part of it never had a chance to reach you. So before your money even touches your decisions, it's already been divided. Before budgeting, before saving, before anything else moves. And that changes everything. You're not managing 100% of what you earn. You are managing what's left, after the taxes take its part first. And just like everything else, if you don't account for it, it throws everything off. Plans feel out of reach, savings feel harder, and budgeting feels impossible. Not because you're doing something wrong, but because you were never working with the full amount to begin with. When money comes in, you don't see the full amount. You see what's already been taken. and what you actually have left to work with. And that brings us to the part that feels the strangest to pay for, because nothing is actually happening. You're not buying something you can use right away. You're not fixing a current problem. You are paying in case something goes wrong. And that's why it feels easy to ignore, because most of the time, nothing does go wrong, so it starts feeling unnecessary, like money leaving for something invisible. However, the moment something does happen, the cost isn't small, it's not controlled, it doesn't arrive in pieces like everything else, it hits all at once, and without anything in place, that one moment can undo everything you've been building. Savings disappear, debt increases, plans get pushed back instantly. So insurance isn't really about what's happening now. It's about protecting what you've already put together from something unpredictable. And that's why it feels like you're paying for nothing until you realize you're actually paying for stability. You're smoothing out risk, turning something uncertain and extreme into something small and consistent. And just like everything else, it doesn't force itself on you. You can ignore it, you can delay it, and nothing will feel different until the moment it matters. That's what makes it tricky, because unlike bills or debt, there's no immediate pressure, no reminder that something is due. But once you see how everything connects, income, savings, debt, you start to notice what's being protected. Because without protection, everything stays exposed. One event, and all the progress you've been trying to build has to start over. So insurance doesn't feel important while things are fine. It feels unnecessary, but it's quietly holding the line, so that when things shift, everything else doesn't collapse with it. And that brings us to retirement, the part that feels like the furthest away, which is exactly why it's the easiest to ignore. Because nothing about it feels urgent. There's no bill, no deadline, no immediate consequence, just a version of you that doesn't exist yet. So it gets pushed, not intentionally, just later. After everything else is handled, after things feel more stable, after there's more room. But that space never really opens up, because everything you've already seen, spending, debt, even saving, keeps pulling from what's available right now. And retirement, it depends on what you do early. That's where the disconnect is, because the impact doesn't show up immediately. You can ignore it today, and nothing feels different tomorrow. But time is already moving, quietly, constantly, and it doesn't wait for you to catch up. So small delays doesn't feel like decision. They feel harmless. Just a few months, a year, maybe longer. But those gaps stack, not visibly at once, but over time. They become distance you can't easily close. Because retirement isn't built on large amounts all at once. It's built on time carrying small amounts forward again and again. And when you start late, you're not just missing money, you're missing the time that would have multiplied it. So it's not about trying to catch up later, because later doesn't stretch the way you expect it to. It compresses, and everything starts requiring more effort, more money, more pressure, more urgency, all because something that didn't feel important earlier on was actually depending on that exact moment. So retirement doesn't ask for attention, it doesn't interrupt you, it just keeps moving in the background, whether you are contributing to it or not. And one day, it's no longer far away, and whatever you did or didn't do is already sitting there, waiting for you. And when you step back for a second, none of these things are separate. They just felt separate because you were looking at them one at a time. The money comes in, and before you even think about it, part of it is already gone. Not later, immediately. What's left starts moving next. Some of it locked into things you can't avoid. Some of it drifting into things that feel small enough not to question. And some of it in between. You are trying to hold onto a portion before everything else reaches it. At the same time, something from the past is still there, quietly pulling from what you are earning now. Not aggressively, just consistently enough that you adjust to it. And above all of that, there's a part of your money you never even touch. Gone before it arrives, already accounted for, before you get a say. Then there's the layer you don't feel until something goes wrong. The part that only matters in moments you can't predict. Holding everything together without ever asking for attention. And further out, there's time. Not waiting, not slowing down, just carrying whatever you give it or whatever you don't. So while it feels like you're making decisions one by one, all of this is happening together. Every time money shows up, every time it moves, nothing is isolated. Everything overlaps, everything competes, everything connects. And once you see it like this, it stops feeling random. It starts feeling structured, like something that was always in place. You just weren't fully aware of it yet. Not a lesson, not a system you just learned, just something you've been inside of this whole time, finally making sense. And if you found this video insightful, please don't forget to like, share and subscribe. And stay tuned for more videos like this one coming your way.